everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to Hot Topics. We're back again, consistently, sort of, for a little while.
Yeah, we'll see how long this one flows. We did really good before, took our little 2-week break, and
Yeah, there was a holiday in there, so it was even like it fell on a proper time. So I was like, whoa, look at us. We're doing so well.
just going in the flow of the universe where it's all good.
Yeah. And now we're coming back at you, and we're talking about specific stuff that we've been talking about for since Vanessa, really, because
Yeah.
it really like stuck. I feel like it stuck in both of our minds, but because your first line, it's something that I feel like you're like, yes, because there's so many different ways you can go with it. And so
Well, and I realized I've been studying this for off and on for a year now, like just really wanting to build that foundation. And then I think talking with Vanessa helped me to have the courage to talk about it more on my own, because there's that inherent insecurity of like, well, I don't think I have the foundation yet to talk about it. So I just got to put myself out there and start talking about it, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, if you're a first line and you don't think you're prepared, that's probably not true.
You're lying to yourself.
You're probably more prepared than most people are. So get over it and just kind of, right? Isn't that kind of the deal with first line?
Basically.
Just strictly talking about first line. We're not talking about motivation yet, but like first line stuff is, yeah, a lot of times when people come to me and I do readings for first line, I was like, you were kind of born prepared.
Yeah. Because it
Or
like first line just like naturally draws us to investigate more. So we learn stuff without even really trying. I know that's something to me. People are like, how do you know this? I'm like, you don't just pick up on this.
I love the way you worded that, because that totally makes sense to me. That learning stuff without trying, that would be like a first line thing. So you've been studying and like really getting into the variables for a year. Dang, well, that's good, because I have not, and we're going to talk about them. Or in particular, we're going to talk about motivation. And you said something the last time we talked about motivation in people with a lot of openness in their body, right? Was that the deal? There was something that you said that motivation is like an important
projector specifically.
Oh, projector specific. Okay, that's what it was. I was like, there's something that I am that motivation's important for them, right?
Yes. And I feel like this could resonate with anybody who has a lot of openness, but according to Ra, he said that the way that generators have the consistency in their body with the sacral that's always responding to life, the motivation is really how you're designed to respond to life as well. So for us as projectors, since we don't have that sacral, our motivation is really an amazing guide to know internally when we're on track, when we're off track, or like what it is that we really, really want.
I love that. And it's easy to remember, like your motivation is the thing that's pushing you or guiding you or moving you. What is it? Like, that's the thing. And I can understand how that you translates a little to like sacral energy moving you along. So that totally makes sense. And when you said that the other day, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I like it when you can find these pieces that really not sub in for the part that we're talking about, like sacral energy. Like, I'll never have consistent sacral energy, but I have this motivation that sort of, well, not me in particular, but I have a motivation moves people along.
Yeah.
Unless you're innocence motivation.
And you do have that consistency of information.
No, I know.
Really beautiful. So yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Just adding to yours. So it's so helpful. And I feel like especially as mental projectors, when we're kind of grasping at what is our authority, what's happening, what can I hold on to in my body? This is something that can be so beneficial when you're soundboarding and you're making decisions. Are you in the correct motivation, or are you in transference inside of making this decision? That's huge.
I can ground you almost. Like, it's one of the pieces. Whenever I think about getting into my body and human design, I'm like, what can ground me? because
Mhm.
that's what I literally feel like when we're talking about body, is like, I'm up here floating with my stuff. I need to get, there's so many analogies for it. Floating, there's scuba diving, we have so many. But that's what
Yeah,
it really does feel disassociative almost,
it
like we're
does.
trying to connect, and this can really sort of connect the two pieces. And I almost, anytime I see someone's chart and they have a connection from the body to these pieces, I'm like, I'm jealous of you.
Like, what is that like?
Yeah, even though like they could totally have an unhealthy, not self connection that could be even like more uh conditioning or difficult than some of the stuff I've got going on, and I don't know that, but like to see the connection, I'm always just like,
Yeah,
whatever, guys, whatever. And it's interesting because Sean is all body, like he's
right.
spleen, sacral, heart. So it's like he doesn't have any of this. And
Hmm.
that also, I mean, I'm like, okay.
I feel like that would be hard. In my experience watching open crown mind people, like I feel like that could be more overwhelming. Like I kind of appreciate.
Crown, mind, throat, G, all open, all the
Yeah.
way down. I know it does sound kind of like, whoa.
Yeah,
But I think the 2-4 really helps tamper like any sort of anxiety or like
yeah,
craziness he might have,
that's
because
true.
I do see that and I'm like, why don't you have more anxiety? Like, where is it? And I think the 2-4 really just like mellows that right out.
For sure. I could see that.
Um, and I think the 22, because he has the 22 in his sun,
Hmm.
which we have in our um earth right now while we're recording this.
At the moment,
Yeah,
yes.
because it was Rebecca's birthday yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yay! This will be out in a few weeks after, but while we're
Yes.
recording this, that's what's happening, and it was awesome. But the 22, I also feel like, as much it is moody, it is also graceful. So there's a little bit of that I feel like helps, I don't know, smooth down any like rough edges for some people. But then
For
there's all, I
sure.
do see the moodiness very much. It's like a sensitivity almost
Uh-huh.
of certain things, and at certain times, like I can tell when I should just like leave them alone.
Mm.
And for me, I'm much more like I have to physically get out of the room, and he doesn't have that energy. He just kind of shuts off while he's where he's at. And I'm like, oh, okay, he needs a minute. And then
Yeah.
he'll start talking again. And I'm like, all right, he's cool. He'll make a joke. And I'm like, all right, everything's all good.
We're good now. We can move in.
But for me, it's like, I have to separate, rah, and then I run away. And he used to think that was like a real avoidant tactic. And I was like, no,
You're like it just doesn't feel good.
I have to separate, gather my shit, then come back.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just, with sometimes when I look at his chart, I'm like, how are you? How does, and I'm like, are you in your not self here? Because it doesn't feel very not selfy. I don't know like where this is coming from.
Like what's happening? Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I knew you were going to start wearing. All right, slam the door on him. Anyway, we're gonna do kind of an interesting. Well, I think it's interesting. I don't know if anyone else does, but it's gonna be fun way that we're gonna go through the motivations so that we talk about all of them and not just our own, because
Mhm.
we like to talk about ours, and I feel like we've talked about ours multiple times. But now we can kind of take a look at the other ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Do all of them.
so your motivation, first of all, is the bottom right arrow, right? But top right.
Yeah.
Top right. I should just let you say these things before I talk.
Yeah, it's the color underneath the conscious sun and earth. So the personality sun and earth. There's the line expression, and then the color comes underneath the line. So we're looking at that one. So you can see how this relates to motivation and how it's responding to life, because it's also connected to your sun and earth, like your biggest energy that you're here to express. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And we each have one, but then we also have a transference. Wahaha, which is just to me, transference and not self are just the two words for very similar things, right?
Totally.
Or
Oh, yeah.
okay. I was like, is
I
there a
bet it's the
difference
same
really?
thing.
Huh?
I mean, I feel like it's basically the same thing too, because transference is just telling you you're moving in the
Signpost.
opposite direction.
You're
And
like,
the not self theme is like, hey, you're not in the right place. So
you know what I see? I see the Roadrunner. I see the cartoon Roadrunner like running through the desert, and he hits like the sign, like he fork in the road this way or this way, and that's what I see anytime I think of like not self or transference.
I love it.
Like every
Intervening
time.
action.
It's so weird
I
sometimes
love
how
it.
the way it shows itself. I'm like, cartoon. Like I see the dust going in my head above, like while he's running, and I hear
Yes,
the
like
sounds.
his feet.
Mm-hmm. Like anytime I think about it, and it makes me laugh. So sometimes when I'm talking about stuff and I get the pictures, I'm like sorry, but I see this in this way, and I know that's not what you meant, but okay. So yeah, it's the signpost that says, "Hey, what's happening here?" And it's not bad or good; it just is.
Mm-hmm.
And transference can really kind of go, okay, is there another? Are you going to continue down this way to continue feeling this transference feeling, or is there something else that you can try? I don't want to say that it's telling you like you're going the wrong way or you have to turn left or you should stop, because it doesn't really mean anything every time. It's different.
Well, I mean, you'll be motivated in your transference for sure. It's just that it's gonna be pulling you to a place that's probably not great for your nervous system and not really where you're meant to be.
Yeah, so you, like I said, you could keep trucking along, but
At some point you'll be forced to stop.
do you? Yeah. Yeah, probably. Yeah, physically forced to stop. That does make more sense. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It's just here to be like, hey, take a look at what's going on. It really just wants you to take a look, like really become
Yeah.
aware of what's going on right now in your mind life. I
It's
feel like
all
it's pretty
awareness.
in the moment, right?
Yeah, because that's again where we think about the response. Like if you think of the sacral responding in the moment to life, then you can really let your motivation respond to life in a similar way and catch it sooner. Like I've started to really notice when I transfer into need and it moves, like I've noticed it so much quicker now. Instead of like a month of doing stuff, I'm a few minutes in, I'm like, oh no, I've been here before. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that fluctuates too. It's very much like what's going on at the time, what decisions you make is going to change how you're feeling, how much you're in your transference versus not, that kind of stuff. So we're going to go through each of them, 1 through 6, and we're just going to kind of shoot off what we think about them, and then we'll discuss it further so that I can learn more about most of them. Because I mean, I have my ideas of all of them. I guess to me, the languaging sometimes makes some of them sound negative and some of them sound positive. And I'm like wanting to make sure I understand the attributes of all of them because they're all good. Like this is your motivation is awesome.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's start at the beginning. Let's begin at the beginning with Rebecca.
So the first one is fear.
Rebecca's number 1.
Did you want to do the first word that comes to your mind thing?
I mean, I don't know if I can do a word because I'm real bad at just one word, but like maybe like a phrase or fear. Do it anyway. It's very first. I know that it's the first line and it feels very first line. So I'm like, that's where I go with it too, is like, they make so much sense. And the fact that you have them both is very harmonious.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And the majority, I have 8 one lines in my design and fear motivation. So I'm like, I'm never gonna feel secure about how much I know. Like that's why I was mentioning that at the beginning, where it's finally like, oh wait, I should just start talking about it.
Yeah.
For me, the first word that comes to mind is foundation. Because I
Yeah.
fear like presents a lot. Like that's a heavy word in our language, and there's a lot
Mm-hmm.
that comes with it, and people tend to get nervous or they'll just make a lot of assumptions about what this means. And like and the main thing is fear is the same thing as intelligence. It's the same thing as intuition. Like it's just that wanting to know things, it's wanting to build the foundation, it's wanting to understand what's going on. It's
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is. So we don't need to present like I did the same thing when I first saw fear motivation. I was like, well, that makes sense. I've been afraid my whole life, but that's not what's happening. Like you're
It's like
being
it's like an episode of SVU where a girl's running through the forest. Like that to me is like fear motivation. It feels very like it's like a
well,
lot of anxiety. Like
to
that's what I
me,
think. But I know that's
that's
not what it
when
is.
that's when I'm in transference of need. That's how I feel when I'm
Ah.
in transference of need. It's like, oh my gosh, I need to get this. I need to make this happen. Like I'm a single mom. I need to make money. I need to have a job. I need to
Mhm.
do this. That's when I'm freaking out and I'm making all these weird decisions and trying to initiate things that are just going to blow up in my face.
Mhm. But
So yeah.
I see what you mean that fear comes from more of a place of investigation rather than a place of being scared. Like it's actually the opposite. It's like actually we need to figure this out. So let's go.
Mhm.
Um and that's like to me that's like bravery. And whenever you talk about your first lines, that's what I think too. Is like you're super brave. Like I don't have I don't feel like I have the capacity to want to know a lot as or to even think that I could know as much as you know or be interested in all the things you're interested in. I'm like, wow, that seems like a lot. So I think your fear gives you a lot of capacity for knowledge and just knowing and not getting overwhelmed. I mean, you still get overwhelmed. Everybody gets overwhelmed, but not getting as overwhelmed with like the amount that there could be to know or your own capacity,
Yeah.
you know.
And I feel like this helped me to really settle into just learning. Whereas before, like you were just saying, I feel like I would have this anxiety of like, I need to learn more. There's so much to know. There's so much I don't know. Because fear also, like, it looks at what's missing and that's how it figures out how to build a more stable foundation and
Mhm.
information to investigate. But now I'm okay with saying I don't know some things. Like, well, I'm not motivated to figure that one out. So like it's fine. I don't have to go figure that out. Whereas before
Mhm.
I would have thought I have to go learn this or else I'm dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. Cool. Anything else about fear?
I don't think so.
And when we get to the transference, we'll talk about it. So when we get to your transference, we can talk about that as the transference as well as the fact is that fear is a transference of okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, we'll talk about it all. We'll touch on it all
It'll be good.
in some way. Um, okay, so 2.
Number 2 is hope.
I look at her because she knows the order. I know the words. I'm like, I don't know which order they go. Hope motivation feels very similar to mine. It's like, I don't know. When I think of hope motivation, I think of I don't know, like the way that they describe serendipity in human design, which is
Mm,
particular gate, like how you have trust in the universe. I guess trust in the universe would be my main thing when I think of hope because it feels very positive, but in a way that is just there. Like the other person is not controlling it. It's just there for them.
yes. I think that's perfect because that really is what's happening with hope motivation. The imagery that Rob would give is that it's like somebody just sitting by a river waiting for someone to come by because they know at some point someone's going to come by. They're waiting for something, they just don't know what they're waiting for.
But they know it's coming.
Yeah, waiting for an answer to come. And so you can see how this relates to that second line too, with that natural genius just kind of hanging out doing its thing, and then it's called out. It's like, I don't know, I'm just gonna do what I'm doing. And then when it's time, I'll be called out. The hope motivation is hanging out by the river, and when it's time, someone will come by and get things going. So they're just doing their
Huh.
thing. It's
Just
weird
doing their thing.
because so Matt has hope motivation and my friend Jesse does. And anytime I try to soundboard with Jesse, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to figure something out. And sometimes I'll soundboard with her, um, because she's just the one that would come to my mind. But then as soon as I try to talk to her, I'm like, all of a sudden I'm just filled with hope. I told her, it's like, I don't even know what to say anymore because I feel like I just got into your hope motivation and I'm like, it will work out.
Oh, maybe that's why. When we get to innocence, I think I can feel, because I'm trying to feel the difference, and now I think I can tell a difference. Remind me that you said that. What's your friend's
Okay.
name? Jesse?
Yeah.
Okay, because I have an idea, but I want to wait till we get there so it doesn't get
Okay.
too confusing. Because I always try to think of the difference between hope and innocence because they're very similar.
Yeah.
I feel like the way you describe it, especially since it's a second line, it almost has a more of a confident energy about it. Like there's
Yeah.
a confidence component of it that maybe isn't necessary for the 6, the innocence.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I think of a lot of times when I think of the 2 energy, is like this innate confidence that everything is just going to be all right.
Sure. For sure.
And that feels just like hope. Like, okay, eventually something's going to happen. And when it happens, that's when it was supposed to happen. Totally
Yeah.
cool.
It's all good. So it's been funny working with Matt because he's this 2-4 hope motivation dude, right? And so he's like, let's just, I think we can talk tomorrow, but let's figure it out. And I'm like, I would like to have a plan and play.
So I guess the more confident you are in your life, how it's flowing and going and grooving, the more you're in your hope motivation.
Basically, yeah.
Oh,
Because it's like, there's no point in controlling anything. It's gonna happen when it's meant to happen.
you always break it down to me in a way where I'm like, there's actually steps here. If people wanted to, they could look into the things that make them feel confident. What makes you feel confident in your life? What does confidence mean to you?
Yeah.
And then kind of lean towards those things. And then it's like, you don't have to think about the word hope. And maybe, because to me, I feel like if you knew you had hope motivation, perhaps you might try to be as positive as you could always be all the time. Like, how can I be more
Well,
positive? How can I be? And that could be exhausting, you know?
I mean, a good question to ask is, does this feel hopeful? If you're in a situation or you're working through something, like, does this feel hopeful? Is there hopeful aspects to this? And that's what I feel when I'm in their space, where I'm like, oh,
Yeah. And I feel
yeah,
like for fear, it's like, are you curious? Like, do you want to learn more? Would you want to
yeah,
investigate further?
yes,
And yeah,
yes.
that's cool. Because it takes like some of the word out of it. Because hope, like to me, is like, oh, angel, and fear is like, I'm scared, obviously. But I know that Ra's language is the ones that he chose, and he did it because he is who he is.
Exactly,
And
exactly. Well,
that's why one word doesn't really work.
yeah, it can be difficult, and a lot of things he named specifically after the not self. So
Yeah, you
that's,
said that. You told me that, and I remember that.
and the transference for this one is guilt, which it really wants to fix things. So you can see that dynamic happening, like, which I could understand if you were a hope motivated person, but you were worried about something or stressed about something. You're like, I can't just sit by this river. Let me figure out how to make a raft and fix it. And then if you do
Yeah,
that, you're going to move out of place and you're not going to meet the person who's meant to find you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. All right, cool. Third color motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, third color motivation.
The third is desire.
What do you think when you think of desire?
I always think like, I want that thing.
Sexy.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess for me it's easier to describe in pictures because as soon as you said it, I saw like an old black and white movie and the guy like grabbing the girl and she was like, "Ah," and they're like super close to each other. And
Yeah.
that's like what I felt and saw. So maybe it'd be better if I try to describe these in pictures. I didn't really think of that.
Yes. Please share your inner vision hits.
Okay.
Let's
That's what
see.
I'm seeing. And I've never watched a movie like that ever. I've seen clips of it, but I don't think I've ever watched one all the way through. But like that's what I see. And yeah, I mean that's what the word sounds like. And it kind of is what it is. Right?
Kind of. Yeah, this one's really interesting with that name because it's about being a leader, really. And if we think about the three energy, this one is very mutative. This one is about pushing boundaries and figuring out what's going on. And so this desire, it's like, well, this is what I desire to do. This is where I desire to go. And so you're bringing that energy out, being able to mutate the environment forward. And the three is also very much about money. So this can be a desire for money, like where's the money? I'm gonna go there.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that the transference of that a
Yeah.
whole lot. This is also Sean's motivation. And I've
Yeah.
been experimenting with him lately by letting him pick stuff. He always defers to me really whenever we do anything. And I think it's just because he's trying to be a kind husband. And he's like, well, what do you want to do? And like traditionally in the gender role world, the man will check with the woman because she's in charge of what their life or whatever. Like she picks what we're doing and like we got to make her happy. So happy wife, happy life. What does she want? Like so lame. And that's why whenever he asks me what do I want, sometimes I'm just like just pick something.
Yeah.
Like I'm good. You don't need to try to like, but I see he's trying to be kind. So it's like, it's not, I get it. But a lot of times I've been letting him just pick, especially on our days off, like what we're going to do. I'll just be like, well, you can just pick. And then he does.
And that sounds like so much fun for y'all because he gets to lead through his desire and then you get to be in innocence and just kind of be around.
And I used to think I had to give him two options, but now I'm really rethinking that. And I really just think I need to give him the reins earlier than that. Like earlier than two options.
Yeah.
Because that's what like we're drilled in our head when it comes to sacral authority is they need two choices. What else is going on in their design?
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I love. That's what I appreciated talking to Teresa. I think she brought this up, how there's like nuance in the sacral, which is really fun. And so looking at the desire here for generators as well, like you're saying, this makes so much sense. Like, what is his desire responding to? Let's just, and then when you think about how sacral is really about desire and satisfaction, is just amplified. It's like, well, what do you want? Like that's what needs to happen here. So
that's why I look at him sometimes almost like a case study. I'm like, I feel like you're really in your not self because you really don't seem to care, like want anything in particular. And his sister is very similar. When I told her that she was a manifesting generator, one of the first things she said to me was, I don't like that many things. Like, what am I? Because I told her she'll have a lot of like stuff going on. She's like, I don't have that many, like, I don't care, like, she doesn't have that many hobbies, she didn't have that much go. She's like, I don't still have a lot of stuff. And I was like, well, you don't have to have a lot of stuff, but I also feel like, I don't know, I feel like they really, both of them kind of like tamp down their sacral like juiciness.
Yeah.
She's also emotional. No, she's sacral. I lied. She's sacral. But yeah, the desire feels very similar. It's like, what do you want?
Yeah.
What do you want?
Yeah, and stepping into that leadership role because that is part of it. So then if they're in transference and innocence, then they're not lead, like they don't want to lead. They're trying to avoid that. So
yeah. And I wonder, like, I'm always wondering, like, are you avoiding leading or am I energetically not allowing that for you? Like, do you feel like you're not allowed? You know? So I keep trying to be like, give him the ball way before I've been giving it to him.
Yeah.
Like, you have it. I don't need to figure it out. Because I always figure out like what we're going to eat, what we're going to do. Like, this is the stuff. And I'm kind of been like, all right, well, You can figure it out. And while that gives me loads of anxiety, I feel it's probably better for him to start earlier to think about what he wants. And like,
Yeah.
for me to give him two things, I already took control of the situation. I narrowed it down to two, but now you don't have a lot of like, I know steak rolls don't do well with a lot of choice, but I feel like other parts of the design are gonna color what that means. A lot of choice,
Interesting.
you know.
How is it working so far?
It's been fun. He finds new places for us to walk the dogs. There's new restaurants that we're looking to go to. It's been cool, but it's also like it's helpful because every time it goes well, it's proof for my anxiety that you can relax. Even though I don't relax all the way still, it's like, okay, just chill out. And we've had a lot more time together, so it's been helpful because then it's like, well, we have a lot of time. So if this doesn't go great, who cares? But I mean, when we're together, everything is usually pretty fun. So cheese ball.
That's awesome. I love that you're doing that, finding ways to support it that way.
I'm trying. That's what I've said. I've realized that maybe energetically, because even if I try not to say something or do something that feels like I'm controlling the situation, what if energetically he's just feeling it? And so his automatic response is make sure she's okay with the choice, and then we'll go that way.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of being like, hey, this is what I'm choosing. Because I mean, he's never going to pick something and I'm like, oh, this sounds like a terrible way to spend time. Like we both have the same ideas there. So
yeah,
he's not going to like say we're going to go to an escape room or something. That sounds awful.
He knows better than that.
The smell of an escape room alone just makes me want to go.
Yeah.
They don't open windows, right? They're all closed. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think there's any kind of air in there.
It makes me feel claustrophobic. And like, you would think caves, I would be like, oh, this is wonderful, but it does not sound.
It's not your cave.
Yeah, exactly. If it was Janelle's escape room, maybe it would be great. But
it would be everybody else's escape.
It would have proper ventilation and no one could come in. So not a very good business model. Okay, so yeah, desire, motivation. I like that you added that. Like, what do you want? But also, what would make you comfortable in a position of leadership? What needs to happen for you to feel comfortable leading in these situations? Because I didn't really think about that with desire as being a component. But now that you say that, it gives people something to look at. Like, you're meant to lead in this energy. So how would you feel comfortable taking the lead? What needs to happen?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people are uncomfortable. They don't want to be first. They don't want to be in charge. Too much work. Oh, I don't want to do it. So I get it, but I can also see how you can look at it and go, well, if I should try being in the lead, what would make me feel comfortable with that? More support? I would need all the support. I would need to be like a queen.
Well, yeah, that's because we're mental projectors. Where I'm like,
I need somebody to do everything for me, and then I feel like I would have the capacity to be okay being in charge.
Yes. Yeah. I know. So I'm like, where?
And I feel like for a lot of people that might help is not being the queen, but like maybe the reason you feel uncomfortable is you needed more support than you think. And you think because you're supposed to be in charge that no one's there supposed to support you in that role. It's like, well, maybe you need more support.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like that goes into a lot of details of the design that I don't know, but the basics is if you have desire, motivation, step into your leadership role.
Be in charge.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Numero
quattro is need.
Need. This is your transference?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you see?
Like kids holding out their hands for candy. Willy Wonka. Why do I see movies? I don't know. But I'm seeing like gimme, 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 like whining and screaming. And that just feels very like, oh, barf. Sorry. Not saying that need motivation is bad, because it's not bad. But that's immediately what I okay. What do you see?
So need is to me, I mean, the 4 always makes me think of externalizing. But they also talk about how need is very much about facts and truth and like doing what is necessary.
Okay.
So it seems kind of simple. It's also hold on. Yeah. So if we think about fear, fear is looking outward. It's like there's a foundation, there's holes, let me figure out how to fill these holes, right? That's what it wants to do. Need is more looking inward, like what do I need to be in this situation?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really care about what's happening out there.
That does feel very 4.
Yeah.
It's
And
like relationships are important, but it's not, sometimes they can be very impersonal, like in their what they're doing, like how they're moving along and collecting information.
yeah. Well, in the 4, it's like they're here for specific people, right? So it's like if they're not vibing with someone, then that's not part of their network.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that's kind of with need too. Like if you're not vibing with this information, then you don't care. Like it's not something
Yeah.
for you to externalize.
I don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you need?
Yeah. So it's very, very much like that. Like it's much more I don't know if ground is the right word. It feels more embodied, I guess. So if they were to transfer into fear, then they would start freaking out. Like, well, I'm afraid. What do I like? This situation is freaking me out. Let me see if I can figure out what's going
The
on.
brakes came off. They're moving too fast.
Yeah, they start trying to figure out like what's happening. They're trying to look outside of themselves, and that fear vibe can take over. So instead, it's like, no, you look inward. What do you actually need?
And for you, when you are looking for too much from yourself, is that when it feels like transference?
Yeah,
Like
I guess that's a good way to put it.
you're expecting too much from you?
I didn't even make that connection. So, but with the way you said that, it makes so much sense. Cause yeah, that's when I start getting needy. I'm like, oh, I need to do X, Y, and Z. I need to figure out how I can make this happen. And so yeah, it puts all this pressure on me instead
of looking for the places where maybe the foundation isn't strong enough, and what can you do to work on that instead?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh.
Look at I love this little moment that just happened.
Yay, that was fun. Cool. I sound like I know what I'm talking about. Great. So but I love the way that you explained it, because need was one of those ones where it just sounded like, oh, you need stuff. It feels almost like desire, almost like wanting, like they all feel very similar. And then now that you've explained it more, I was like, well, it's more of like what is like you need to look inside yourself. Like, what do you need versus, I guess desire is also kind of, is that internal as well, or is that like
desire? Kind of. Because it is like, what do you desire? But it's like it's also kind of related to outer vision, because it's like, ooh, I want that. I'm gonna figure out how to go over there, and that's where the leadership kind of goes too.
Okay, I get what you mean. So yeah, need is more like, I don't need to be in charge. What do I want? To move myself forward. What do I need? I guess.
Yeah, what is needed in this situation? And that's very different from the investigator figuring out holes. It's like I probably don't need to fill the holes in that foundation, but it would make a better foundation, right? But the need person, instead of looking at foundation, they're like, well, what we need is this kind of foundation, and then we need to put the poles here, whatever it is. This is what we need to do.
Yeah. It almost feels like survival view. I know it's not the same.
It does feel very similar. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Before we use too many words and confuse you. We'll go to 5. 5.
So 5 is guilt.
Okay.
What do you see with this one?
This make me cry. I just see my childhood. I was very guilt ridden, but like I said, I did a lot of it to myself. I made sure I never did anything to get in trouble. My parents were never worried that I would ever get in trouble and do anything I shouldn't do, because I knew that the guilt I put on myself, was more than they could do. Like, even when I did something I shouldn't have done, I would always react so over the top, like blow it out of proportion, like feel bad about what I did, that they would never punish me, because they were like, you just did it to yourself.
Right.
So that's what I feel. That's what I think about guilt motivation is, I don't know, like you really keep yourself in line, in check.
Yeah, I could see that. And then that makes me think of mom guilt, where it's like, no matter what I do, I feel guilty that I'm ruining my kids somehow. Guilt is such a heavy word. This is like fear, like we're talking about. It's a very in our world. And basically anybody who finds out their guilt motivation, they kind of have the same reaction. They're like, what in the world? That sounds horrible.
Yeah. It sounds like it goes against everything you learned growing up. Is guilt is a tool that people use to manipulate you. And I don't want that tool to be a part of my design. Like, it just feels weird. So I can see that.
Yeah, for sure. But if we think about this, this is again a 5. So this is about universalizing a message, and the guilt is really about fixing things. And we can kind of see that in the 5 too, like the philosopher thing, like looking at what's happening and fixing this one way of making it make sense. So that's the basics of it. It's about fixing things. And this one, like, this actually really helped me studying this, because I'm fear, and then both my parents and my brother and my ex-husband and my oldest son, like all of them are guilt motivation.
Oh yeah, we talked about how this affects you.
Yeah. Like, no wonder I could never soundboard, like, and why I felt like they were trying to fix me, because they were trying to fix me.
So I guess it's, how can I fix? Is this internal or external, or a little bit of both? Or
yeah, this one's really rooted in feeling. So it's like kind of feeling what's off and using your ability to fix the situation. Like, you can feel something's off, so you can feel how to fix it.
Okay. So like, when you feel this urge to fix something, and it's really rooted, like you said, in feeling energy, then I guess that's the way that you go. Or that's the way that you lean.
The 5 is also very much about conditioning, like being a conditioner. If you think about, again, the universalizing a message, that heretic thing, like you're conditioning people to be a certain way. And Rob would say this with his 5-1 profile. He's like, I'm conditioning you. I'm basically deconditioning you to recondition you, like through my languaging. I'm like, this is so true. So
yeah, whenever I talk to people with 5th line profiles, I'm like, I don't really know what to tell you.
Yeah. Like,
this
sorry,
is a hard one.
Especially if they're a projector too.
Yeah, sorry about
that. But when this one transfers to hope. So if the guilt motivated person is in transference, then they're just like hands off, like, I guess it'll work out. Like,
that's where it was hard for me, when I was like, the transference sounds unknown. Like, I don't want, like, the transference sounds good. Like, the transference, like, hope sounds great, but I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
It's more of a, are you in a position of, like, are you in it or are you not in it? Like, are you, like you said, are you hands off and just kind of letting things happen? Or are you using your guilt motivation to decide where you feel pulled to fix stuff, I guess?
Yeah. And if we go back to the analogy of the river that we were talking about in Hope, so your guilt motivation in this scenario. So you do want to create a raft. You're like, I'm stuck by this river, so let me figure out how to make a raft. And then inevitably you'd float down and probably find somebody else who's in trouble. You'd be able to fix that situation. Like that's appropriate for a guilt motivated person. So it would just be like if you're in that scenario, one person's going to feel really strongly like, I think we should just sit here and wait. And the other person's going to be like, you're insane. We're going to make a boat and leave. And both are correct.
It almost feels like guilt is action and hope is not as much action.
Basically. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I feel the same way about desire and innocence. Like desire feels like action and innocence is
not
the absence of action. So okay, good. I feel a little bit better about guilt motivation now and understanding what it means, because I was always like, this one's that of all of them, that was the hardest one for me to figure out how I can talk about that in a positive, constructive light. Not necessarily positive, but more of like what can you do with this information?
Right.
Because that's what I feel about a lot. Sometimes things in human design are presented. It's like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Even though I know as a projector, we're not supposed to do things. When I say do, I mean, what am I supposed to how am I supposed to process that?
Right. Like,
So,
where does
like, where does this go? Yeah, I guess that makes more sense. Like, where does this fit in here? And so now that you've said it that way, it makes more sense that it's like an action oriented motivation.
Yeah. And I think about myself growing up with around all this guilt motivation where I felt like
Pushing you to take action.
Yeah, like wanting to take action, wanting to do something. And
like there's no I need to find the own holes in my foundation. Get out of here.
Right. Like like I'm driven by curiosity and I'm fear motivation. So I just want to like ask a bunch of questions and stare at a bunch of things and figure out how to build a better foundation. Like, and there's
probably really pushed you to fix things that didn't need fixing. Made you think that there was things that need to be fixed that didn't need fixing.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't really think of that.
It's so wild. So that's just something to consider when you're around other people. Like we talked about, like if like you have to consider the fact that your husband is desire motivation, so it's going to be a different thing.
And in my transference is desire, so it's like,
so yeah, that's a real interesting dynamic there.
Well, when you talked about money, that was really where I was like, oh yeah, because he could give two shits about money. He doesn't want to talk about it. He doesn't want to think about it. He doesn't freak out about spending it like I do. He just is like, whatever, money is money. It comes, it goes. We'll get it. We won't get it. Whatever. And I am the opposite of that. And I think a lot of that is my conditioning from growing up. Really pulls me into the desire transference hard.
Yes.
Just pulls me over there, and I know that I'm there. But also in my mind, it's like, well, one of us has to think about money, and it's gonna be me. So that's where I sometimes feel like, yeah, you're in your transference, but you might need to stay there for a minute. Like you can't just jump out of the fire and you're out of it. It took a while to get there, probably.
Right. We think about nervous system stuff. And if your nervous system is attuned to like being in transference, and it's kind of like being addicted to sugar or something, right? Like if you have been living off of a bag of Twizzlers a day for however long, and then you try to quit, your nervous system is going to freak out. And it can feel kind of good to be in transference, honestly. Like when I think back, I feel like that's when I would kind of feel like I was making more progress. Like, oh, I
feel
need
safe
this to take care of my kids, so I'm gonna go do this. But then I feel like now I can see none of that really worked out.
Yeah. So two things. It's cool to be in your transference for however long you're there, and when you become aware, then look towards your motivation, I suppose. But you're not just going to jump out. I guess that's what I mean to say is like, you're not just going to become aware that you're in your transference and be like, oh shit, and walk right out of it. Like, that's just not probably not how it's going to go.
Yeah. But I've been actively observing it for a while.
I can most of the time, but My motivation is also a little bit of a slower
Yeah, let's talk
motivation.
about yours because this is the perfect segue.
Okay, so segue into 6. I know
Six,
this one.
innocence. What do you see with
Innocent.
this one?
The hills are alive with the sound of music. That's what I see. It's her twirling around in the field.
Yes.
That's what it is.
That is a good description because I usually say like I usually see like a little girl in a field of flowers. Like that's
Yeah.
very similar imagery. That's perfect.
That's what it is, guys. So don't try to do anything with it because you're not
Yeah,
supposed to.
this one is about being, but okay, here's what's really fascinating and fun about the 6 line and this innocence. It really is about being, and it's about transition. It's about trust. And this has a little bit of leadership in it as well, because the 6 is here to get us to that next level. Like if you look at the 1, we've been building up this whole thing. And so the 6 can really look back at everything else, at all the wisdom that's been accumulated in 1 through 5, and kind of integrate that wisdom and then move it forward so that the next time we do something, we're able to do it more efficiently and better because this 6 has brought all the wisdom with it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you're not really doing anything in this. You're being in the situation, you're integrating all the information, you're becoming this wise role model so that you can help us all transition to this next phase.
Yeah, I know. Don't get me wrong. I love innocence motivation. I can feel when I'm in my motivation, and it's similar to you. When I am in desire, a lot of times I can be like, whoop. It depends on what's got me there. Sometimes it takes me a little bit longer, and I think a lot of that has to do with innocence motivation. It feels slower moving. It feels like it's at its own pace, and when things happen is when it happens. It feels very much like when you're talking about the hope motivation, sitting on the river knowing that something's going to come. Innocence motivation to me is sitting on the river and has no care that anything is coming or not coming. There's no thought of it. It's staring at a leaf of grass, or hey, there goes a cloud. It's very in the moment, and it's not waiting for anything. It just is.
Yeah.
Which that's how when I was thinking about it, like how it separates, that's kind of to me how I can separate hope from innocence. Is hope has this confidence that there's something coming along, but innocence doesn't need that. It's not a part of its vernacular. It's not like it doesn't have the confidence. It's not important. That piece is not important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. Cause that too, you're right. I feel like there's just this innate confidence that comes with it, like, "This is what's gonna happen, and it'll be fine." And the 6 isn't even thinking
Concerned.
about that. It's like, "We're just here."
Yeah. I'm not concerned about what's coming or not coming. It doesn't affect me, which feels, ugh.
But,
It feels
okay,
like a lot to live up to, man.
tell me how this feels, because what's hitting me as you say that, um, because I really do feel the 6th line, like, it's learning so much, and it has that transition vibe to it, to be kind of this leader teacher in a way. And so it's not like it's not concerned about the timing of it. It's like it's all time at once. I just lost my thought in the middle of my thought. Um, does that make any sense? It's like,
Kind of like it's just not like time isn't a thing. It's not important. And it's very, to me, it's some of the most in the now energy that I feel like I have, even though it doesn't feel urgent. It doesn't feel like, to me, splenic energy feels more urgent. And this is just like, this is where we're at. It really helps me feel gratitude in my life. It helps me feel grounded in my life, and it helps me stay present in the moment, because I have a lot of other stuff that pulls me in other directions, not just in my design, but in my conditioning and in the world that pulls me around. But
yeah,
the innocence thing is something that really feels grounded in its lightness, in
yeah,
its floatability. Like it feels very light and floaty and blah blah blah. But for some reason I can really like get with that. and feel like I'm stable, I'm safe in this weird innocence bubble, even though it doesn't sound structured or anything. It's just there. And yeah, I can see how, like, because it's the 6, we're transitioning. So it's almost like time isn't important, or it doesn't really matter, because that's not what we're doing right now. We're not thinking about time. We're thinking about the transition. So I don't know. It feels, this one, like I said, I love my innocence motivation, but it's also like, well, what do you do with it? And for me, it's, when do I feel like really super light, but that feels safe? Like, I don't feel like I'm floating away. I don't feel like I have no control, because that would give me anxiety. But when I feel safe in the lightness, and it feels good and it feels right. And usually it's a very in the moment thing. Like, I'll feel it and I'll be like, stay in this moment and remember. And I'll like try to make myself look. I'm like, look at everything. Like, where are you? What's happening? Because I want to hang on to it. Because it feels like it goes away quickly.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, come back. And so it really helps me to move in that direction, because it's like you feel it and you're like, it feels like a bubble bath, or like your body is champagne bubbles. Like, it's just a really cool feeling. And I'm like, wait, don't go away. And so
come back. I want to experience this more.
That's why this part of my design, I really feel like I lean into as hard as I can, because I do really enjoy it. And I do feel when desire comes, it's almost like a little dark hand that reaches out and is like, you want things, you need things. Where's all your stuff? Where's your money? How are you doing this? What do you want? And in a sense, it's like, I don't want anything. Like angel devil shoulder almost, like, and in a sense, is like, cool over here. And I know that makes them sound negative, positive, which is not what I'm trying to do. It's just, that's how I can see how that would be how it feels for me, because it's my transference. Like,
right.
Sorry, but that's how it feels to me. Like,
well, and that's what's interesting, because for you it is the angel devil, but then like for Sean it's the opposite.
Right. And that's why it's so crazy. It's like the complacency of innocence is not necessarily as good for his energy. And for me, it's not complacency, it's
correctness,
exalted, lit up, like, feeling. It's very, that was one of the things I want to make sure we touched on, is like, just like you said before, one person's motivation is another person's transference. And so these things mean basically not necessarily the opposite, but very different.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And it's just like, when we think about the shadow and gift, and there's such a fine line between the two. I might have said this in the last one too, where it's so interesting.
For me, I can feel the separation more in the transference of motivation. Like, I feel the difference more than sometimes the other transferences that we've talked about. Like, it doesn't feel opposite, but it feels different.
I feel like desire and innocence are very different, but like fear and need, very similar.
Now that you've explained them to me, they don't feel very similar. They did before, but now I'm like, I know you explained it to me in a very good way, that it's like, I can tell.
Yeah.
Which is probably helpful for people who have that as who are you?
For sure. Yeah.
People who are Rebecca.
The hope and guilt, that's very different too. So yeah, the motivation is fairly opposite.
Yeah, I think it is.
The fear and need are very different, but like, it's probably like what you said at first, they felt very similar. I think what I mean for me is like the difference between switching between the two just feels so thin in my body, where it's like, all of a sudden I'm just over here in need.
It feels pretty thin in my body too. Like,
isn't it? And I think that's,
but I notice it real quickly. But so do you.
It's
so
just
you're sensitive to the click.
Yeah.
But you don't know how it happened. You're like, wait, how did I get here so fast?
Right.
And maybe that is kind of what everybody is maybe that's when you really know when you're slipping into your transference, is you didn't know how you got there. You don't know how you got there. You skip the part of the
Yeah.
transition from one to the other. You just are there and you're
Start
like,
observing. Yeah.
and then you see it. Ooh, so don't try so hard to notice like when you switch, because you're gonna probably miss the part when it happens and then you're in it. And then you're like, oh, so don't try to stop it from switching. That's good advice for a lot of people when it comes to your emotions and trying to control the things that are not controllable in your body and in your mechanics. And I think probably switching from transference to your motivation is not, you can't stop it.
No. It's one of those things. It's like with basically everything in our design, we're surrendered to it. We can't really control it. We can just observe what happens, and we can start to surrender to it more. And like you're saying, like we could probably just start noticing, like, oh, I'm in transference. What was I just thinking about? And it's probably money for both of us. Probably for,
Yeah, that
like,
does it to me a lot.
oh, I need money for my kids, and so let me figure out what I need to do to get this need taken care of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I go down, I think, for the most part. I'm going to start observing more and seeing what comes up there.
Yeah. Well, this was fun. I feel like I learned so much about the motivations, and I hope you all
Good.
learned.
Yeah, I learned some stuff about myself. I just had another thought about that too. So this is really cool. This has helped. This is why I love talking about this stuff, because I'll get these realizations in real time.
Mm-hmm. And the variable really helps you, like she said, to get little clarity bursts of like, oh, well, this makes sense that I would do this way, or oh, I can see when I'm over here and this, and it's just something that, like, knowing your type or your profile or your and all that stuff doesn't get you there. It gets you close, but this is just another piece of the differentiation.
Yes. Yes.
Yay. Anything else you want to add? I think we did really good.
I think so too. We covered a lot of ground. So I'm curious to hear how people relate to this and if it's helpful.
Yeah, we're so on track. I mean, come on. Like, who are we? So yeah, thanks for listening. If you have any questions about motivation or anything else, let us know. Thanks for the comments we've been getting and the traction we've been getting on the page, because our YouTube page has been doing pretty good. So I'm proud of us.
Yeah. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah. So bye.